From the moment he took office, it was clear the administration of Donald Trump would be very different.
From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
It didn't take long for the United States' allies to realize that meant they were now dealing with the most disruptive president since World War II, straining the system of international order built over 75 years. Trump moved quickly to dismantle the achievements of the Obama administration. At odds with all his closest allies, he pulled out of the Paris climate deal.
Believe me, this is not what we need.
And then the Iran nuclear agreement.
This was a horrible, one-sided deal.
Later, in the midst of the pandemic, he withdrew the U.S. from the World Health Organization.
Today, terminating our relationship with the World Health Organization.
Not only did he pull the U.S. out of the UN Human Rights Council,
the hypocritical and self-serving organization,
Trump rarely ever stood up for human rights. And at times, he seemed more comfortable with the US's traditional adversaries than its closest allies. We now know from some of his advisers he came close to pulling out of the US's most important military alliance, NATO. Summit meetings like this one in Brussels were awkward events, with everyone else treading on eggshells to avoid the ire of the impulsive, often ill-informed US leader. Most US allies around the world are now breathing a sigh of relief, despite the drama after November's election. President-elect Joe Biden's foreign policy is easy to summarize: reverse direction, re-sign international agreements, and work collaboratively with allies.
America is back, ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table, ready to confront our adversaries and not reject our allies, ready to stand up for our values.
The relationship the presidents before Trump built with their allies was based on trust. It's a commodity that takes a long time to grow but is easy to lose. And that's the problem for the Biden administration. The US's closest allies will be looking over their shoulder, wondering whether in 4 years' time Trump will be back. And if it's not him, it could be another president with Trump-like America First policies. James Bays, Al Jazeera, Washington.
OK, let's get more on that story for you. Joining us live on the News Hour, Al Jazeera senior political analyst Marwan Bashara, talking to us from Doha. Marwan, good to talk to you again. Foreign policy narrative comes down to personal skills, doesn't it? Interpersonal skills. So does that mean that Mr. Biden's going to get on with everyone? Because he's been around the bloc for so long now.
Well, certainly his 48-year experience in politics and in foreign affairs does give him an extra asset, if you will, over both his predecessor and his predecessor's predecessor, meaning President Obama and President Trump. He does have the experience, there's no doubt, both in Washington and in the world. And I think that's going to serve him really well to do the things that he said that he will do. He will move in confidently. He will, as it were, hit the ground running, and that's why, as we've heard from various reports, in his first day in office, he will be signing a whole number of executive orders, perhaps 12 of them, including ending the ban on Muslim-majority countries to travel to the United States, and a whole bunch of others that are important for him to restore that faith in America, to restore America's greatness, or, if I may use the expression, Peter, to make America great again after its decline under Trump.
Marwan, you can say that one time and one time only. We'll let you away with it this time. Do you think his focus, though, will be led by ideology or will it be led by issues? I mean, you and I are old enough to remember, say, Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter liked to cherry pick issues around the world, much to the annoyance of his own political base sometimes. He put human rights at the centre of the international aspect of his administration. Will Mr. Biden have to do the same kind of thing?
Well, that's the thing. President Carter, for example, was the total outsider. He was a little-known governor of Georgia, not much known outside the state until he really broke out of after the disastrous years of Nixon, right? What we have here is something completely different. Biden is the antithesis of an outsider. He is the ultimate insider. And that's why I think it's going to be less about ideology and more about the continuity of American leadership in the world, of American leadership of the liberal order in the world, which means mainstream liberal foreign policy, which means restoring, as Biden calls it, the spirit of America. And what is the spirit of America? Well, it is civility, at least claiming to respect human rights, not to be such a mean president as President Trump was known to be. So in order to restore what Biden likes to call American leadership in the world, he's going to have to restore America's alliances around the world that, again, President Trump has trampled all over. And in order to do that, he's going to have some program of some sort. For the time being, what we know, it's going to be the antithesis of Trump, meaning, yes, building alliances, going back to some of the important agreements, including climate change, the Iran nuclear deal, and perhaps some new nuclear deals with the likes of Russia and China, reassert America's leadership over international institutions. That's sort of a continuity of mainstream liberal American policy, which I think is in some way ideological, but it is a continuity of almost half a century of that.
OK, if he does score some real international successes here, when he gets beyond the blitzkrieg of executive orders unpicking the early days of the Trump administration, how much of that will be tinged with or driven by nostalgia? Not nostalgia in the United States, but nostalgia around the world, because there does seem to be a genuine need for a more thoughtful, a kinder, gentler Washington when it comes to how it interacts with other heads of government around the planet.
Well, yes, and I think that's a bit of where the paradox lies. On the one hand, America's allies, notably in Europe and Southeast Asia, would like a sort of the return of America, the restoration of American leadership, because that does support them against their nemesis, whether it's China in the South China Sea or whether it is Russia when it comes to Europe. But just to be clear, America's policy has not always been kind and nice and wonderful. Just our recent memory, we recall the wars in Iraq and the wars in Afghanistan and so on and so forth. America has committed more than its share, of wars and crimes and so on and so forth around the world, which, of course, President Obama admitted as much. So in so many ways, yes, it is about restoring American leadership, but in so many other ways, to restore credibility, that's going to take time, because I think the Europeans, for example, have already made their peace with the fact that they're going to have to go it alone, if need be, that whatever the future relations with Washington, it cannot go back to the pre-Trump years only, that Europe is going to have to be treated with mutual respect and mutual interest, that Germany and France and Europe as a whole has, superpower interest, as it were. And so they're not going to trust just the words of Biden. They're not going to trust words in general. They're going to have to look, and they will be looking for deeds, meaning not just executive orders, but how Biden will rebuild alliances. How will he go back and lead and support financial and otherwise major international institutions like the UNESCO, like the International Human Rights Council, like the climate change initiatives and so on and so forth. It does look from that, for example, let's say climate change. He already put an emissary, and not just anyone, John Kerry, which if foreign policy is decided by appointments, clearly some of his appointments do signal a certain seriousness in tackling some of the important global challenges facing America and the world.
I suspect we'll talk about this a lot over the coming few hours, few days as well. Marwan, many thanks. Marwan Bishara there, our senior political analyst.